Hi there, my name is Johnny Meatsack. Like you, I once held a normal life in a normal place with a normal job. I had a normal family. Hi, Karen. And simply thought I'd live my normal life to a normal death. One day, however, I experienced this thing called gnosis, a direct revelation of a truer but distant reality, and the realization that my reality was a fabricated construct. I discovered my life was a lie and my identity was as synthetic as Alexa or Siri, and that the universe itself was a penitentiary built by cosmic overlords to trap and feed off my dormant, authentic consciousness. Jiminy crickets, I thought. My only choices were to join an awareness-killing cult like a political party or just kill myself. But by some luck or providence, Sophia's grace, I discovered Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio. Despite the host's creepy monologues and the show's blasphemous topics, I was able to develop the ability to uncover my authentic consciousness and deal with this prison planet. In other words, this gnosis grew until I was a fully divine being, no longer in the thrall of entities called archons and their soul-numbing, amnesia-causing powers. Thank you, Aeon Byte, for waking me up to my true eternal nature. Everything is still normal these days, except me, Johnny Meatsack. I'm on the adventure of many lifetimes to be completely liberated from the Black Iron Prison. Welcome, everybody, to Aeon Byte. Welcome to AB Live on this Moon Day, and happy 9/11. I know. It's kind of a weird remark, but it is a sort of a holiday for us who, in the esoterica, conspiracy circles, and the occult. It is a time when many of us got our red pills or pink beams or woke up. 9/11 and has been continuous for all of us who are trying to understand the man behind the curtain. So in a way, it's good to, you might say, celebrate or commemorate or reflect on this day. And the topic today is definitely lends to it. And I'm very excited. It's going to be an amazing show. My name is Miguel Connor, and I am still your Pompadour of Gnosis. So with us today from the dying dystopia of San Francisco, we have the honor of having Wayne Mattias. Wayne, thank you very much for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Miguel. I tell you, I've been watching you and your friends, Chris Knowles and Gordon White, Gigi Young, Dark Journalist, and Steven Snyder. And, you're all a bunch of escapees from the funny farms. and I love you guys. You're my people.
Yes. I am so happy that you are here. I'm so happy that you started the blog, The Open Sanctum. Incredible research and definitely something to share with the audience and spread the word, because we cannot be free. We are not free, and we cannot be free until we continue to deprogram ourselves. But with us too, we've got the Moondog Vance. Vance, happy 9/11.
Oh, same to you. Never forget where I was on Route 280, driving to San Francisco, actually, on my way to work. And I turned around and went back home.
Yeah, it's one of those days everybody's got a story. But again, it's also red pill for other generations. It might have been the assassination of Kennedy. When I think yesterday, one of the witnesses that was there came with some mind-blowing new evidence or witness. He basically turned around or destroyed the whole story about the lone gunman. For others, it might have been Vietnam and the Gulf of Tonkin and who knows what else. But 9/11 was certainly a big red pill, or sort of, you might say, awakening experience for so many people. I know as far as JFK, I know Elvis never believed the one lone gunman story. He was one of the few minority people who loudly in the media would talk about how there's no way it was that the official narrative was wrong. So, but let's get to, yeah, the really important stuff, which is the idea of the mind control and Wayne's work. For all of you there in the chat, good to see you. I see you there, Chester. If you get a chance, Chester, please post the scores of the New York Jets Buffalo Bills game. I want to see if Aaron Rodgers still has it. He left Wisconsin and the Bears still suck. So it is. Hey, Grandpa. I see HP Lovecraft. So good to see everybody. And as always, if you have a question for Wayne or a comment for me or Vance, please super chat them and we will separate them from the crowd and get to you as soon as possible. You guys are so smart. Everybody who listens to the show is amazing. You are the final authority. You're going to do so many wonders once you fully wake up and listen to your soul that has all the answers, including your sacred purpose. So, Wayne, let's talk about you. You have been on a few other podcasts, but this is your first time honoring the Virtual Alexandria. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your journey of awakening.
Well, I was born here in San Francisco, one of the rare natives. I've been away and I've come back again. I probably will go away again at some point. And I've seen a lot in the last 6 decades. I would say that had some interesting, some high strangeness type of encounters because a lot of strange things have happened in this city over the years. I went to the nursery school in the Presidio, which was subsequently taken over by Colonel Michael Aquino. And I lived for a time just a few blocks from the People's Temple. I mean, it's kind of like being the Forrest Gump of the Bay Area. I mean, there's encounters. You know, I got to meet Timothy Leary and Robert Anton Wilson, which was interesting. And I wish I had been better prepared for that because I was rather young at the time and was not able. I wouldn't be able to engage with them properly for many years hence. So, but it wasn't. I would say, you know, there are encounters that open doors, let's say, and then you can proceed on your own and learn new things that you might not have otherwise. And for a time in college, I lived in a cabin in Monte Rio, which is about 50, 60 miles north of here, and just next door to Bohemian Grove. I mean, I didn't even really know. I mean, I didn't really know until I started talking to protesters who would show up for to run, you know, because the Bohemians had to run the gauntlet every time because there's one road in and out. And I got to talking with folks and I got to learn about stuff like, the Bilderberg Group and, you know, Davos and all that stuff. And I even hiked in. I'm not advising that, by the way. I was just lucky, you know, because all I had to do is just go right over the ridge and down the other side, and bingo, is on Bohemian property. And but I did not have a map. I had no idea how big the place was or which direction the owl was in, and I got scared. I got to admit, I didn't want to hang around and get caught by security and arrested for trespassing. So, you know. Had I been better prepared, but nowadays I got to figure they beefed up security. You know, I mean, the technology is, everybody kind of knows what's possible now. So really, I'm glad at least Alex Jones managed to get in and out and get some. I don't know how he did it but
unless he's controlled opposition, that's one.
Yeah. Well, any case, one of the unusual encounters, and this is something I hadn't even anticipated, is that I met one of the original victims of MKUltra, who was one of my neighbors down the road in that neighborhood, and his name, I believe, was Timothy. Remember, this is like 40 years ago, so it's a little hazy, that part, but we got to know each other, and man, we really, he was one of those people who was a mental patient who had been given big doses of hallucinogens. And when I met him, he was a broken man.
Mhm.
I mean, I had never seen anybody so frail and vulnerable. And I was touched, honestly. And he always had his little puppy with him. That puppy was named Lucky. And that doggy saved his life. I mean, this is like John Wick. You can see that sometimes that's all it takes. Just the love of an animal could make all the difference. And I never forgot this guy. He was, and I knew that, well, maybe someday I'd be able to learn more about what happened. And I did. And I kept on learning. And when I started writing science fiction, which, I had this brief career in Hollywood. First, I was an actor in film and TV, doing tiny roles in big films and bigger roles in completely unknown films, and then got into screenwriting. Because after all, there's a thing about, I was always interested in writing, and gradually got, tried out different genres, historical fiction, action, and ultimately sci-fi, which I'm still doing today, but I'm not doing screenplays. I decided, I just had enough of Hollywood. It's the level of hustling and the fact that it's not a meritocracy, okay? Because if it were, wouldn't we be seeing a lot better film and TV?
Amen.
I think you're right. I mean, so, and I don't know the secret handshakes, and, I'm not going to be, there are certain parties that I probably wouldn't be invited to and I wouldn't want to go to.
Yeah, you don't suck the right dick or dick at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you saw that film that came out, I think it was last year, Babylon.
Yeah, it was
Marco.
intense.
Yeah. And I tell you, that just gave me kind of like a spiritual nausea. I was just like going, oh my God. Maybe I was lucky that they didn't want me that badly, So now I prefer writing stories, meaning short stories. I'm hopefully going to get to a novel eventually, but I'm trying to get the hang of just good old narrative on the page, hopefully printed up someday in a science fiction magazine. And the story that I started working on this year, The Reality Benders, which is kind of a retro sounding title, is reminiscent of Phil Dick's early titles. And it is set at Burning Man. Rather remarkably, Burning Man got in the news recently. I hadn't anticipated the mud fest, but
man.
Yeah. But the premise was that the main character was a veteran suffering from PTSD and suicidal, basically, and he decided he would go to Burning Man and hopes of finding something that would give him some, relief or even some healing. And there is a cult, a sex magic drug cult called The Bridge, making its debut at Burning Man, distributing a new psychedelic drug called Epic. And this is a designer drug. It has been created by a scientist at UC Berkeley who was once under contract with the CIA. Kind of, not too far off the mark as far as what actually happens.
Once under contract? Did you ever not get out from under contract?
Well, you see, the thing is that when he released the formula, nobody really knew whether he was really going rogue or whether this was actually part of an op. So anyway, I think I've set the stage sufficiently. I'm not going to give away any more spoilers, but you get an idea of where my head's at. And I decided okay, to do this right, I would probably want to learn more about A, the history of mind control, and B, what has developed since the MKUltra days. Because goodness knows, MKUltra is like boomer mind control. Okay, that's 1950s and 60s. Those are the days of Sputnik. Okay, and transistor radios. Okay, so things must have moved on significantly. And it turns out there is a new wave of research going on. It's been going on for at least 10 years, 20 years in some, depending upon the technology. And it could be world changing. And the more I learned, the deeper I went. It's not just a rabbit hole, it's a total warren. It's an underground city teeming with mutant bunnies. Okay, so this is so big. I couldn't help but say, I can't just put this in fiction and hope people get it. I've got to put it out there in a way that is nonfiction, that people can look up and see, yeah, this is going on. And some of it is going to become reality. Because, there's a thing about research. Some of it will turn out to be vaporware. You could pour millions and millions of dollars and years of hard work and world-class talent, and it could still fail, right? How many examples have we seen of that? I mean, just look at military weapons procurement in the last 20 years. I mean, if you know about certain projects that have just been complete debacles, where the cost overruns were like more than twice what was originally intended, and it never worked right, and it probably never will. And you go, okay, that's part of the reality. But some of these technologies or techniques will probably work, and at least partially. And if they even work partially, then it'll be a new ball game. We're gonna, we can talk about the early techniques, and indeed we can talk about the whole, if we talk about the transhumanist part, I would say that is an ideology that has been in development for the past century or so. It originally came out as science fiction, and to get these ideas circulating, and now it's sort of translating into actual policy and business and research, and ultimately it could turn out to be the dominant ideology of the 21st century. So I don't know which direction you'd like to approach this from. We could talk about the brain stuff now, or the transhumanist, or the science fiction, which is kind of fun because I write science fiction. I could, so do you have any preference? Because
let's wait for the science fiction towards the end, give people something to decompress. Yeah, and thanks for your story. I think in your blog or your Substack, you write about Operation Midnight Climax was run in San Francisco, in your town.
Oh gosh,
prostitutes would lure customers and give them drugs. But I think that's the thing that's shocking, is that the idea is that the CIA and the military is not supposed to test on our citizens, that it only happened in Canada and Vietnam and Korea, but that's not true. It happened in the 50s and 60s, and it will happen today because they need test subjects,
Yeah, well, I would say that there's more than likely the people who are doing research now are trying hard not to have a scandal. They'd like to keep their funding and not have to resign in disgrace or anything like that. I mean, we could look at the story of Dr. Jose Delgado as an example of, he was a very prominent researcher, famous for brain implants in the 1950s and 60s. I don't know if you remember this. We have pictures, by the way, in case you'd like to pull them up. Because
do you want to go through the pictures first?
Yeah, sure. Because it does sort of go in order here.
And then we'll figure out which direction to go or what the audience likes. That's why it's fun to do live, because you can get a feel what the audience wants, and that's always important. So
I smell an Elon Neuralink coming.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that. Delgado and the Neuralink. Okay.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, this is simply an example of behavioral techniques that are they're part of our everyday life. If I'm defining mind control narrowly, I would say that um, that is more, let's say, involuntary. You can, most of the time when we're, being raised in a culture, we're being exposed to influences continually from childhood onward. And so we might undergo conditioning of one sort or another, and it might take the form of education, it might take the form of organized religion. We could be trained in any number of skills. And so really behavior, all of this classical operant observational, this is part of our everyday life. Now, mind control is a different thing because that is meant to get past, it is meant to undermine volition, meaning if you are exercising free will, you can choose to reject conditioning. You can choose to reject propaganda or peer pressure. I mean, it can be difficult, but you can, reject being hypnotized if you understand the techniques. And then you would become hard to control in that manner. And so mind control is meant to get around that. And so it doesn't matter if you originally didn't want it, you're going to get it anyway. So anyway, let's proceed to the next picture.
All right, slide 2.
Oh yeah, this is actually prior to Delgado. This is actually even before World War II, because if we talk about the history, is it okay? Shall we talk just a little about that pre-war? Because I didn't know until I started investigating the Spanish Civil War that there was a fella who had experimented on prisoners in enhanced interrogation. Now, we are familiar with that term now because Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo, and the basic, and it was probably practiced similarly in the Korean War when the communists were interrogating American prisoners, for instance. Now, prior to that, the Spanish Civil War was 1936 to 39, and Alfonso Lorenzic was he was someone who managed to talk his way into the service of the Republic's intelligence service, and so they allowed him to experiment on prisoners in a secret prison in, I believe, Barcelona, and he had designed special cells which were intended to break down prisoners' resistance. And basically it was designed very much to make them uncomfortable so that they could never properly rest. And then they would suffer the effects of sleep deprivation. And if you also combine that with things like lights and noise, again, this is something that people who studied Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib, similar techniques were being used. And so his cells were kind of an alternative to old-fashioned torture, where instead of trying to thrash somebody into talking, which actually is not reliable, and people who understand the distinction is that coercion under torture results in the prisoner just, if necessary, making stuff up just in order to make the torture stop. It doesn't change the attitude of the prisoner. In fact, the prisoner could become even more hostile and, hoping for payback someday. And the contrast is what you're seeking with mind control is conversion. Conversion meaning you have now altered this person's mind sufficiently that they will accept a new belief system, and they will then become cooperative. And so whether or not Lorenzic's cells were effective, I think that it showed let's say, creativity, to say the least. Let's see the next picture, and then we'll give you an example of what I mean. This is one of his cells. And as you can see, there are some geometric patterns on the wall. Some people believe that was inspired by modern art because Lorenzik was a painter. And people might say, oh, there are influences of Kandinsky or Salvador Dali. And yeah, well, basically, he was trying to create visual patterns that would disorient the prisoner. And as you can see, there's a slab, a block with a slope. Okay, and that was meant to be the bed or a place to sit. But as soon as somebody fell asleep, because of the angle, that person would eventually fall off or slide off. You see, so they'd never really be able to sleep. And notice there are blocks, these bricks that are set into the floor. Standing up, that means that the prisoner cannot walk around or stand around for very long. Right? And so gradually, this person is going to eventually succumb and become more suggestible. That's the idea, anyway. So anyway, after the war, because the nationalists won the war, they immediately they found these prison cells and turned this into a propaganda opportunity to show how wicked the Republic was, because they had, of course, whether you which view you take depends a lot on your, it's a very ideological thing. Plenty of people will make excuses for whichever side they feel more sympathetic towards. But it really is, it's always been a shades of gray thing. And I would, you could say, well, and it turned out that after the nationalist victory, that Franco invited some high-ranking Nazis to come visit. So the Nazis got to get an eyeful of this, and maybe it inspired them to try out mind control techniques during the war. And of course, the communists in Russia, because they were military advisors to the Republic, they too must have known about this. This very well may have inspired both the Soviets and the Nazis during World War II. And we understand that the Nazis were experimenting with mescaline and hypnosis during the war. And, well, it turned out with their transferable job skills, they were immediately hired by the CIA after the war. I mean, really, you can't argue with that's an impressive resume right there, So, and so then we enter the period of MKUltra, and now we get to go to hopefully the pictures are in the order I had intended. Let's see.
Wow, this gives new meaning to Pan's Labyrinth, walking around this place. Let's see.
Oh, that's Delgado. Here we go. Oh, yeah, let's go.
So
yeah,
you're in
let's
the
go.
right one.
Yeah. So this is an early picture of Delgado. He actually, interestingly, he was a Spaniard. He had actually been through the Spanish Civil War on the Republic side. There's no evidence he had anything to do with any of that, the prisoner experiments, because he was like helping the medical corps, because after all, armies need people to help the wounded, right? So after he had been released from captivity, because the nationalists imprisoned him for a while, he made his way over to the U.S. and got educated at Yale. He turned out to be a technical whiz, and he managed to get himself a posting as and eventually became a professor for Yale, and got to do these amazing experiments with. He was fascinated by electrical stimulation of the brain. That was his big thing. His entire career was built on this. That's, by the way, that unfortunate-looking monkey there is one of his test subjects. You can just barely make out what might be a device on the back of his head. But in any case, because the early implants had some of the circuitry was outside of the head. eventually he was able to miniaturize it so that it was much more flush to the skull, and it was about the size of a $50. And that was as far as he took it. Maybe it's gone further since then. Anyway, and the box he's holding is, of course, the remote control. I mean, talk about, that is definitely retro technology, shall we say?
Yeah, say the least.
I mean, really. And he used a box very much like that in a very famous stunt, which, oh, by the way, let's go to the next picture, and we'll get a picture of an X-ray here. Okay, that is one of the monkeys with, and you can see that there are two electrodes going straight down into its skull, and there's some wiring that runs along the top of the skull towards the back. And like the original units were probably hardwired at first, and then became wireless. He was intending remote control, hence the box with the antenna. And ultimately, in 1963, he managed to pull off an amazing stunt, and he lived to tell about it. You can show us the next picture.
Okay, next picture.
And that's, yeah, that is his hold my beer. This is him. That's Delgado with his remote control in hand, and he is a bull with the implant. It was charging straight at him, and he pushed the button on his remote, and the bull stopped right in its tracks. You can see how the legs are stiffening and the dust is being kicked up.
Right.
And that, you know, instant fame. Talk about a photo op. Jesus, that's so he believed in his work, and he never saw himself as a villain. He was always the misunderstood genius. Okay. He wanted to improve the human condition, and he eventually wrote a book in 1969, Physical Control of the Brain Towards a Psycho-Civilized Society. And this became very controversial because he was outing himself basically as somebody who believed that if you want to fix the world, you're going to have to fix people, and why not just mind control everybody? Seriously, that's really what he believed. And really, when you think about it, if you look at things from a materialist paradigm, which he definitely was operating in, if you can alter someone's behavior or their emotions or their perceptions simply by running a few volts of electricity through a region of their brain, then how can you take the concept of free will seriously?
Oh, yeah.
You see? I mean, if you look at it from that point of view, it seems quite logical. I mean, it's also psychopathic, okay, but it is quite logical, okay?
Yeah.
That's so we are dealing with a mindset, and it seems, you know, I don't know if some of you would like to view what's going on with the human condition as a kind of struggle on the spiritual level of powers and principalities. That I definitely can. I'm right there. I can definitely. In fact, I have posted in the past, half jokingly, that I believe this world is run by an interdimensional crime syndicate engaged in loosh farming and soul trafficking.
Very Gnostic.
just kidding, you know, right? But actually, maybe not. And but the people who do the donkey work, who do the research, the minions, by and large, they operate from a completely materialist, reductionist paradigm.
Right.
And
the managerial class.
Yeah, well, yeah, and in terms of brain research, well, the premise that has been powering mainstream psychology and psychiatry and also the neurological sciences is that the mind or consciousness is an epiphenomenon of brain activity, analogous to the way that a light bulb produces light. Okay? Now, if you take that, and that means if, you know, the light bulb burns out, well, that's the end of the light. You know, that if your consciousness is completely dependent on the brain, then you've got to focus on the brain. That's where it's all happening. Now, one can, I think, take quite different views about what consciousness is, what the mind is. I think that's one of the important philosophical and scientific questions as well. And the remarkable thing is that scientists like Delgado and all the generations after have been working towards mind control technology without even understanding really what the mind is. I mean, isn't that that's utterly bizarre? But that's how it is. And also, I believe that's probably why they're going to fail ultimately.
Ultimately, yeah.
That's what I'm counting on. I mean, there may still be casualties, and there have been lots of casualties from all of the attempts. But I don't know if they're ever going to get to the point where they achieve permanent total control. That is the Holy Grail, and I don't think, God willing, they're not going to get there. And the thing is that this isn't simply about stopping or criticizing particular individuals. It's about a complete cultural mindset. And that's the thing that happens person by person, and it can take long time. How this is going to happen, I don't know, but we have to at least start somewhere. So anyway, let's proceed to the next picture, because I think we can. Delgado and this is Delgado in his later years. He eventually, after he had outed himself and then faced a storm of criticism, in early 1970s, he ended up moving back to Spain and managed to get a job in a medical school and continued research, but with a lower profile than before. He claimed, by the way, that he had never worked for the CIA. However, he did receive some funding, I believe, from the Office of Naval Intelligence. I mean, there were military, and one has to bear in mind that it wasn't just the CIA. There were numerous agencies all engaged in their own projects, in the military particularly. And also the goals of mind control were shifting over time. Originally, it was about how to break prisoners and make them talk. And then I believe it went to how to turn somebody into a slave, basically, and let's say an assassin, like a Manchurian candidate, the Bourne Identity type, or a monarch sex slave, which means that you're basically trying to re-engineer an individual, and that takes some doing. I'm sure they accomplished at least some success, but the thing about programming is that, at least what folks seem to have observed, is that it can break down over time, and then those handlers have to be attentive, because they might have to take their subject in for a little tune-up or something, otherwise they end up like Britney Spears, So anyway, like I said, Delgado never saw himself as the bad guy. He was the good guy in his own movie. Okay, and that's just how it is. And he eventually moved back to the U.S. at near the end of his life. And but his attitude actually was very much that what I would call basic transhumanism. The idea that we have the power to change human nature, to remake the world. Well, why don't we? Why don't you just there are different flavors of that idea, of that mindset operating in the world today, definitely here in San Francisco, because we have, this is tech bro city. We've got people who are like right on, think of themselves they're on the prow of the ship, forging the way into our glorious techno-utopian future. And of course, they're going to make a fortune doing it. I mean, that's, I've got a quote here by, if I can hopefully I'm organized enough to find this thing. where there's
Who's the quote from?
Delgado, because he had I've got it. There's or maybe I don't. Oh well, you see, the gist of it is that how do you think you're going to stand in the way of progress? How do you think you're going to stop technology? And there's this sense of inevitability about it, where you're not going to beat this thing. Resistance is futile, right? So just jump on board the train and let's go full steam ahead. And the modern version, you might have heard of effective accelerationism. It's a trendy term. It's abbreviated E/ACC. You'll occasionally find this certain techies on Twitter in their profiles. And the basic idea is that if we are going to have progress, and the only way we're really going to have a chance is if we go just full tilt. Don't hold back. Don't put the brakes on. Let the technology and the market forces take care of us. It'll be fine. Don't worry. And it's like, wow, that is a leap of faith, man.
Just lay down, bite the pillow.
And really, there's actually, there are folks out there and who are all ready to, let the AI take over. Bow down to the AI machine god. I mean, I just look at this and I go, "Are you serious?" I mean, but there you are. I mean, these are some highly intelligent people. There was a guy, very well known around here, Lewandowski, who's one of the pioneers in self-driving cars. I don't know if you ever seen self-driving cars where you are, because we've got them, and I usually see them with a human behind the wheel while they're training the AI. And one night, as I was returning from the airport, I spotted one of these Waymo cars with nobody inside. It started up and it passed in front of me doing a left turn, and I could see the wheel turning by itself. I mean, that was that just like took me back. I'm like, whoa. Okay, so that's I personally don't think this is such a great idea. There's all kinds of situations where that kind of technology could create some real trouble, and but it ties in. We're talking about mind control, and as it turns out, computers and AI are totally enmeshed. I mean, this is like peanut butter and chocolate. Okay, you cannot, you can have them separately, but they're going to work together. Okay, there's a synergy going on here. So anyway, let's proceed on to the rest of our history, because we have to get to the present day.
Goodbye and damn you, Delgado. All right, let's go.
Yeah, this is the MKUltra house. This is the house which is just over the hill from me. I could walk to it in about 10 minutes.
Wow.
It's on. You see, I'm on Telegraph Hill. I'm on the south side, and this house is on just the other side, the north side, facing Alcatraz and the Golden Gate. Okay, and this is as it looked, I think, about 20 some odd years ago. It's already been remodeled a bit, but that was the house that the CIA turned into a brothel and installed, hidden cameras and two-way mirrors, and and I'm sure they had a jolly time. Can you imagine having an assignment where you basically, it's LSD and hookers? It's like, Jesus.
How could you tell it from the rest of San Francisco then?
Yeah, well, I tell you. And I figure, as they say, if those walls could talk. And there's another picture. So you can see the next picture shows how it looks today.
All right, let's see what happens today.
Yeah, It's pretty nice now, I would say. They took out the fire escape and it repainted it, and they put a new front in. It's worth a lot of money. This is a pretty well-to-do neighborhood, and so then please don't bother anybody there. This has changed hands so many times. I'm sure that the owners probably know something about what was going on, but it's just a house now. Okay, I think it's like 15 million or something, like, at least.
God for that.
I know. This is San Francisco. It's kind of like New York now. Okay, so yeah. Any case, that's a bit of history right in my neighborhood. So let's keep on going, because I think there's more. Oh yeah, we're moving on to cults now. If we're, no history of mind control would be complete without cults. And I guess this is the granddaddy of them all, Dianetics, with L. Ron Hubbard. This is, I think, 1953. And of course, it later turned into the Church of Scientology. And I've got to say, in my Hollywood years, I got to work with, guess who? Tom Cruise. Yeah, he's one of the most successful, if not the most successful, Scientologist around. And did you get to see his latest movie, the Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning?
No, I haven't seen it.
Oh, talk about synchronicity. The I'm not giving too much away here, but the centerpiece of that story is an AI gone rogue. Okay. So yes, the all-powerful AI is the villain of this piece, but it probably doesn't think it's the villain, right? So
Cruise quit Scientology just recently.
Did he?
Yeah, apparently something about his daughter. They wouldn't let him see his daughter, something like that.
Yeah. Well, in any case, so obviously, cults have been around for, longer than we've been alive. And let's see, if we go to the next picture, we might see a.
So that's L. Ron Hubbard. Looks like Julian
that guy.
Sands.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
about that.
But he was what, Navy intelligence?
Yeah. Well, he claimed, he was. No, I don't think he was quite that prominent. In any case, I don't know where he got that e-meter from. That those devices they were using.
Yeah.
I bet you that is probably based upon.
Yeah,
really, we're talking. Yeah, definitely retro. Let's see what we get in the. I should keep track of. Yes, this is more recent. NXIVM. This is like more recent. The sex trafficking branded, and there is Keith Rainier, and I think that's Allison Mack, who was recently released from prison. And it is remarkable that you can get people in the cults who are actually educated, successful, and you can make it into actually human potential movement cults were a big thing, I think, from the 70s onward, starting with Est. Everybody some people remember Werner Erhard. And there are numerous such things, you might call the, there's an acronym, LGAT, Large Group Awareness Training. That's the classification for all these, what you might call the seminars. It's about all these groups they got named, and it's all about being all you can be. And it's remarkable that you can, the techniques of creating a cult is basically creating a new tribal identity, and this really is very attractive, particularly in the modern era when people are feeling alienated and they would like to have a sense of belonging. And then if you know how to utilize recruitment techniques and also promise them exactly what they've always been longing for, something that makes their lives whole, you can, it is remarkable what you can get people to believe once you've got them in. And people's temple, of course.
Also too, when you're talking about intelligent people, obviously people with trauma who have big voids are easier. And also, someone said, intelligent, talented people tend to see the paradoxical nature of life and they can't get through it because life is paradoxical. It's dualities. So these cults offer a healing from that type of thinking. So that's why they're
Yeah. Now, Now, as far as the way that this fits into a mind control context is that you could say that this observing this. I mean, I'm not saying that any alphabet agencies were actually creating or controlling cults, although it's quite possible. It would make just as much sense to observe and infiltrate an already existing cult. And then you would not have to worry about, you could actually extricate yourself and not leave traces. And the importance of it is that you can observe how mind control works in groups. And then if you can see the dynamics of different people, different walks of life in different contexts, you might be able to extract new potentials for how to scale it up to a larger population. And I had speculated, and I have to make sure I can make distinctions between stuff that's documented and stuff that where I'm going out on a limb. I would say that after that whole era of, the Manchurian Candidate, the Jason Bourne, the sex slave, the one of the new objectives, which is much more ambitious, is what I would call the MK Society. And that is very similar to what was described in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And we can talk about that when we're getting into science fiction. So anyway, let's move on a bit and see who's what. Yes, now we're getting into the 21st century. And this is the next generation of research. Now, bear in mind, I'm not singling these people out because I think that they're villains. I don't think they are. But they're doing science. They're learning about how the brain works, and there are definitely therapeutic applications. And they could be highly beneficial if they do work. But we also have to admit that they are dual use technologies, which means they could have, in other words, civilian applications and then other applications. Okay, and they will all admit is that yes, whether this is harmful or beneficial depends upon what you do with it. And these scientists are perhaps in a position similar to Werner von Braun when he was working on his rockets. I think that, perhaps he would have been quite happy to not make ballistic missiles for the Nazis, but, well, that was what was there. He was, it's a job, and they're going to, and he just couldn't turn it down. And because, and then he got to work on for NASA, and perhaps he enjoyed that more. I like to think, Anyway, this fellow here is Dr. Carl Dieseroth, who works out of Stanford. He's got his own lab. He's also an investigator for the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. And he is what I would call one of the pioneers and one of the leading authorities on the technique of optogenetics. Now, when it comes to this new line of research, we're going to be talking about there's actually two main tracks, which are, you could say they come under what is known as the BRAIN Initiative, which actually started up under the Obama administration, but the research actually started earlier than that, which was, the intention is to create innovative technologies, and breakthroughs, okay, in neuroscience. And one of the big projects is creating a map of the human brain a much more sophisticated map than has ever been done before. And we can talk about that in a moment. The second part, there's a structural map and there's a functional map. meaning that the structural map is rather like a schematic diagram that shows you all of the neurons and all of the connections between the neurons. Now, that doesn't mean that, and that by itself is a formidable undertaking. We're talking about, it's estimated about 86 to 100 billion neurons. Oh. And imagine if every neuron can have up to 7,000 possible connections with other neurons. And now as the possible synaptic connections gets up into the trillions. Now you get an idea of the scale of just trying to do a 3D simulation of a human brain. And I think we're going to need a bigger computer. Okay,
so we're going to need a bigger boat
or another brain.
Yeah,
bigger brain to control the little brain.
Yeah. So now that is not even a map that shows you the functions. This getting to hang of understanding how the brain functions. You've got to. The idea is to actually track all of the chains of neurons firing, all of the patterns that are arcing across your brain like microscopic lightning bolts, thousands of times a second, or maybe more than that, all day long, all night, and correlating them with all the different states of mind. And can you imagine and this is even beyond moonshot level ambition. This is beyond the atomic bomb and Bletchley Park. All put all together. But can it be done? Well, let's find out. And this is like just throw billions of dollars at it, and maybe 10, 20 years we'll see something. And you see, so I can understand why people would be skeptical. Okay. Now, the thing is that Diceroth has done a heck of a lot of work over the last 20 years. I got to hand it to him. A few years ago, he and his team had isolated the part of the brain that is behind the state of mind called dissociation. Now, the dissociative state of mind could be actually rather important. I didn't put all the pieces together at first, but when you look at it in a mind control context, it could be of central importance. In fact, he might have already made the biggest contribution in terms of that, the dark arts, you might say. The technique of optogenetics involves making as you can tell, there's a genetic part, making a modification to the neurons to basically add an on-off switch that you can actuate using certain wavelengths of light. That's the opto part. And then to activate or that desired part of the brain, you would have to get a light source into the brain, and that would require some invasive surgery to put in an optical cable, basically a fiber optic implant. And if we see the next picture, I think we have got an example, a famous, in fact, photograph. There is our test subject, and you can see right there that optical cable, a glow right on top of his little noggin. And this is, now the first stage of this type of research is, again, functional brain mapping. You're not actually trying to change anything about the mouse's state of mind. You're more interested in trying to correlate, switch a circuit on, a certain region, and see what it does. Look for some kind of result. With mice and other animals, it's kind of difficult to really get into their heads because they can't talk to us, okay? But, they've been able to infer things just from behavior. You can learn a lot. And indeed, the mouses, these little brains can actually were also valuable for the the 3D simulations as well, because they're smaller. You can, it's easier to work with. Any case, we can, this is obviously not really going to take off for humans. I mean, there may at some point be human subjects, but I don't think really we're going to be able to sell this idea of anybody getting a cable into their head. I mean, probably not. But so the contribution is mainly for research. And there are other techniques, chemogenetics and magnetogenetics, which actually could lead to treatment delivery systems that humans will accept. Okay, so I don't know if we might go on to the next one, because I know the mouse is pretty. By the way, there's a great video with that very picture on it. One of the slickest propaganda videos I've seen on YouTube for optogenetics. And guess who made the video? The WEF at Davos.
Oh, what a surprise.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's really quite remarkable how they get around. I don't know what, and one of the other key sponsors and inspirations behind the Brain Initiative happens to be DARPA. Go figure. DARPA and IARPA. I didn't even know about IARPA until recently. That the D in DARPA stands for defense. The I in IARPA stands for intelligence. Okay, so that's a more recent creation. So that is the intelligence community's version of, kind of. I know it's a little derivative, but hey, they're trying to do their bit, and maybe they're sharing information, or maybe they're spying on each other. That, I mean, in any event, there's plenty of encouragement to go around, in case people want to know where's the next big thing. If you want to have a thriving career. Maybe you want to try brain research or the advanced computer research, which is necessary to support this type of, they feed each other. In other words, we'll get to that in just a moment. But let's continue on to the next thing. There are the two techniques that I still wanted to cover. Oh yeah, well, this is one of the other researchers. I believe the man holding the box is Robinson. Oh God, I should be good at finding people's first names here.
Holding the basketball thing in.
Well, the I believe the fellow with holding the white box is the head of the team. And they're at Rice University, and any case, there are tracks of research that involve brain-computer interfaces. Okay, that's and that has also dual-use potentials here, because, well, you can imagine, you've probably seen pictures or videos of people who have had, who might be paralyzed, and they put, let's say, a network of sensors on their head, and then they can, operate a computer just by moving their eyes, and so, or they could operate some remote controlled prosthetic limbs or something, right? So this is important stuff. It could be extremely valuable. Let's see, you got to keep the, I should definitely, okay, psychotronics. Yeah.
Psychotronics.
We'll get to psychotronics. So I don't want to skip over that. There's like extra tracks of research here. The electronic stimulation of the brain, which involving electromagnetic fields, and then there's also the psychedelic drug research. Well, this is a lot to keep on my mental desktop here. Okay. To talk about, to get to the chemogenetics, which I don't have pictures that correspond to this, but again, there's a genetic modification to the neurons. And this time the on-off switch is activated by drug molecules. And what they are doing, they have an acronym. It's a clever one called DREADS. D-R, no, wait a minute. DREADD, which stands for designer receptors exclusively activated by designer drugs. Okay, now you've got, that means you could create a specially targeted medication, let's say. And then you, instead of, and hopefully this will actually reduce the side effects that are commonly associated with psychiatric meds or the drugs that are administered to people with neurological conditions. And yeah, so, and of course, if we were looking at it in the mind control context, well, you could create all kinds of states of mind. And of course, with anything pharmaceutical, you'll probably have to make sure they keep taking their meds. It's a bit like, did you ever see, you remember THX 1138?
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So, you'd have to make sure, if there were like this mind-controlled MK society that relied upon medication, well, you'd have to make sure. You'd have to, keep after them about it. You don't want to get arrested for drug evasion, right? So anyway, the next technique, which I think is could, in its own way, again, be beneficial, but we still don't know fully about what how the other potential uses. Magnetogenetics, again, there's a genetic modification, which, by the way, the modification is usually administered by means of a genetically engineered virus. Just, I just putting that out there. That is the preferred technique. And the on-off switch for the neurons this time is activated by electromagnetic fields, which could be perhaps the electric. Now the thing is that the field emitter, at least as far as I understand, it has to be close to the head. It has, so it could mean some kind of a helmet. It could be a bulky device. It could be the kind that it requires a skilled operator, and you might have to go into a doctor's office, perhaps. And there are people right now who are getting treatments called transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, for conditions like depression, PTSD. There's a number of conditions where this actually does provide some genuine relief, and without the side effects that come with medications. And you can, now if it happens that there are other forms of technology that we are unaware of, which might be, let's say, less obvious than some kind of helmet that you have to stick your head into, I can't, honestly, I cannot even begin to speculate. This is one where, yes, I'm a science fiction writer, but, I don't want to go too far out on a limb, and then, because right now I'm trying to give an intel briefing. It's not, a sit rep. It's not meant to like go way off into the ozone. Okay, so let's go on to the next thing. And I'm sure there's something, it'll all come back to me now.
Don't worry, we got time. Vince, can you take over? I've got to let the cats and the dog out. All right.
Yeah, so this is an example of the brain-computer interface. This is one of many possible configurations. And as you can see, this fellow here is operating the chess game on his computer just with his thoughts. And so, I don't know if you know anybody who has had or is now struggling with some severe neurological intractable ailment of some kind, but really this is there are people out there who need a miracle.
Sure.
I have a friend who is in Florida who had a stroke series of strokes actually, and now she cannot walk and can barely speak. That, so if it turned out that there were some applications of this brain technology that could help her, regain her abilities, God, I couldn't in good conscience tell her not to. There could be consequences, but if people were informed about it, the thing is that the real issue, a big issue, is that people should not be taking treatments without being fully informed.
Right.
And we can certainly look at what happened in the past 3 years as a prime example of what can happen. And we are probably going to be continuing to deal with the consequences, I'm sorry to say, for years to come. In fact, I don't know if you know anybody with vaccine damage from the mRNA.
Not
jabs.
Personally. I know some
Yeah.
people on the web that that claim that, but no, not personally.
Yeah, well, you can imagine that. It would be well. We will see. I guess time will tell if there are, let's say, legal repercussions for the people who foisted this on us. I think there ought to be justice of some kind, one way or another, and especially it's important because we don't want anything like this ever happening to us again. I mean, I don't know if you have personally, how you might have been impacted by the pandemic.
Tremendously.
I mean, in terms, yeah. I mean, really, it's like they took a wrecking ball to our society. I mean, I had to quit my job because of my previous employer's mandatory vax policy. And we're in San Francisco, where pretty much everybody just bought the party line. And I was not, and this was a law firm I was working for, so I was not about to try to get into a legal battle, especially since I didn't really like the job that much anyway. So,
it did you a favor.
Yeah. I mean, it's just let's call it a premature retirement. And
right.
Yeah. And it's rather ironic. It seems like, I don't know how things look where you are, Vance, but it seems a lot of the folks who are kind of sickly looking are the ones who got the jab. I don't know, but it seems like, for considering that it was meant to make people more resistant to the virus, I don't think it's really worked out that way. Huh?
The most you could say is it might lessen the severity of the disease when you catch it, but as far as conveying some sort of immunity for any long period of time,
Yeah. Anyway, I'm trying to kind of keep it on an even keel about it. A person can get rather bitter if they start thinking about about how the pandemic infected you or your people who are close to you. And I had, one of my coworkers during the lockdown committed suicide.
Oh no!
That was in 2020 on Memorial Day weekend, and I didn't know her well, but clearly I think of her as a casualty of the pandemic, because the thing is that she had a problem with depression. She kept it to herself. And I believe that her job was a people job. It required her to go out and meet people. She was like a recruiter, okay? Yeah. And I think that being able to, the fact that she was kept at home continuously and not able to do the job that kept her going, right. Well, I think that might have been the last straw.
Yeah.
And I just think, God Almighty. I mean, how many, it reminds me, it makes me think again of my neighbor who had been the victim of MKUltra. It's like, how many casualties are we going to be seeing like this? And we really do have.
Brains are broken, like PTSD veterans, their brains are sometimes permanently broken.
Yeah, well, it seems, thanks to multi-generational trauma, I think we have mental illness or disorders are pretty much rampant now in a way that I've never seen before. I don't, and
Agreed.
this unfortunately means that there will be a demand for more psychological treatments,
Sure.
psychiatric treatments. And indeed, DARPA's interest in brain research, they say, is that they are concerned about all of those poor veterans who are struggling with PTSD. Now, honestly, because after all, the present day medications are probably not doing enough. So we've got to find some better methods. Now, I really would like to believe that DARPA really does care about our veterans. I mean, my dad was a veteran of World War II in Korea, and
Wow.
by the time I was born, he had enough PTSD for 3 men, and it was untreated. So that you can imagine my childhood was, let's say, rather dramatic at times.
Yeah, Jesus.
So yeah, I care about the veterans, but I think about, well, what else could they do with this technology? Because after all, DARPA's mission is to improve our national defense. These breakthroughs are meant to make us more capable of waging war, and wouldn't that mean weaponizing this technology?
Yep.
And
Sure.
so
and who you're protecting, most of the time you're protecting the elite from the citizens, from the mob.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that way.
Yeah. Well, another factor that had occurred to me, and this is something that I don't know if other people considered this possibility as well, is yes, there is similar research into both brain activity and also advanced computer design going on in other countries. Some of those countries are rivals, let's say, China, Russia, and you've got to wonder, I wonder, why isn't this technology more classified than it is? If indeed we are rivals, if indeed we wouldn't want our advanced research falling into the wrong hands. This is a very different situation, in other words, from the World War II, when we had the Manhattan Project and the British had Bletchley Park breaking the Nazi Enigma code. Those were absolutely the blackest black projects of their time. And however, it would seem that all of this brain research and the computer research is all going on in the open.
Yeah, that always seems
everybody
like
can access it.
This is the tip of the iceberg. Who knows what's being done under the auspices of classified programs? We just won't know.
Yeah, well, I would say that there are things that one perhaps can infer, you can guess, but again, trying to confirm it, that's another story. I don't want to encourage people to make mental, let's say reality maps that they cannot really feel a sense of certainty about, but if we see that there are things in the pipeline that are definitely, at least we know people are investing heavily in them, the computer research, absolutely. Then you got to go, okay, this isn't just a make work program for nerds. They want something to happen. Some of it's going to work, some of it's not. And, just like the Nazis with their Wunderwaffen in World War II, they were trying everything.
No.
Some of it, throwing the spaghetti against the wall and seeing what'll stick, So this might be another case of that. Let's proceed, and we'll get into the computer side of things, because this is where everything gets synergistic, as they like to say. So that's an example, of course. That is an example of
quantum computer.
The glamorous part of the that they put this whole assembly is called a chandelier, and they put this into the deep freeze because the current technology requires these ridiculously cold temperatures, just barely above absolute zero. Now, of course, I've heard that there are supposedly room temperature superconductors out there, but of course, I cannot verify that. And for all we know, there could be could it possibly be that there might be some fraud in the scientific community? I mean, has that ever happened?
No, never.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of money at stake. So you can imagine there's a lot of incentive, and maybe, of course, there might be a few people who, I don't know, they might decide to just take the investors' money, kind of like, and then kind of like, see you later. I mean, you might remember one of the famous cases was Elizabeth Holmes.
Of course.
Theranos.
Oh,
Yeah. So, could there be something like this going on in the computer industry? Or,
it's a mechanical jerk. It's another.
Yeah, you got to figure it. I mean, and even though, I'm impressed as hell about the whole idea of quantum computers, the fact is they've been pouring money and energy into this for like 20 years already, and they still haven't gotten the error correction and the noise issues properly mitigated yet.
Well, maybe they should plug it on and off.
I just go, Jesus Christ, is this like the worst case of vaporware in computer history? I don't know.
Well, it's Schrodinger's computer. You open the box, you don't either it's working or it's not working.
Right.
Or an interposition of both.
Yeah. Well, in any case, it's right now we got a horse race going on because there's other competing advanced design tracks out there, and we can go on to the next one. There's neuromorphic and biological, and this is like progressively more way out. Okay, but it's wild. I think it's worth mentioning here because what we need to complete the brain research are computers thousands of times faster than anything in service right now. And it's not going to happen with von Neumann architecture. You're not going to get there from here. You got to do something radical. Okay, so let's get on to that next radical design track. Now, the term neuromorphic means that they're using the familiar materials that they make processors out of, but they're reorganizing them to mimic the structure of neurons. Now, this is interesting because this is where the learning more about the brain feeds this track of research. Now, if you can actually create these kind of artificial neurons, and there's a term called the spiking neural network, which is really, I think, pretty darn clever, I got to say. If this thing pans out, well, you're at the very least, you're going to make much more efficient computers than we've ever seen, which would mean, you not only will they be faster, but they could also consume less energy. And that's a good thing because, if you imagine all those server farms out there and all of those, everything gets hot. They've got to there's a lot of waste. And imagine if you can make it way, way more efficient. That would be cool. I mean, heck, we'd certainly have, imagine the gaming machines you could make with this thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe I don't know if you ever got into gaming, but I got into it early, so I can sort of get behind this to some degree because everybody's looking for the fastest, the newest, fastest thing, man.
Right.
So, any case, we can move on to the next one. I mean, I wish I could explain it better, but I'm not. The art of explaining complicated things into simpler layman's terms. This is like, God, it takes, the human brain is really, we're having to make an effort here. Now, biological computers is like the next more, probably the most radical because it involves materials derived from nature, meaning, biological materials, rather than, silicon-based processors. Now you're talking about cells, or you're talking about DNA, because after all, DNA contains its own code. Well, you could use DNA to be a information carrier. My goodness, we can. It's kind of. I wish I could. It requires a higher level of education than I have, just to grasp the literature, and even the popular literature does. So and of course the most way out, which is just going straight into Cronenberg territory, is wetware, where you've got actually living cells that you have harnessed to do the processing for you. I don't know if you ever saw a movie called Existence.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah. Remember that gaming pod, that fleshy thing that that was and they plug it with an umbilical into the back of your head. And it's like, that's what I'd call a committed gamer. Jeez. And that would be creating, imagine the processing power, because, so they did make, this is something that is actually in the literature. You can go look it up. They made a primitive processor using neurons from a leech. Okay. Right. and they also, and another one from slime mold. And I'm going, okay, sure.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?
Well, you think is you got the weird thing is, of course, you got to keep, first you got to keep you got to keep your computer alive and healthy. Okay, I don't know what you're gonna feed it. Maybe you have to, give it some sugar water every now and then, or something.
Then it'll get addicted to something before you.
Yeah, well, any event. As far as whether or not we're gonna have, some sentient AI from any of these versions of computers, I'm not really gonna go that far, because, well, my own take on it is that I don't know if, would consciousness actually just spontaneously arise out of any kind of artificial processor? That runs algorithms? I don't know about that.
How could we tell, though?
Yeah, well, there's the thing about the whole Turing test idea.
Right.
Supposing what you did was, what's going on right now, all of the big, the excitement that's been, whipped up this year about AI, with things like GPT and all that. What I sense is going on is that really we're engaged in making a better human impersonator. That's what a Turing test winner would be, a human impersonator. It's quite possible that if there were an actual, a truly artificial intelligence that was aware, it might be quite alien to us. It wouldn't necessarily think like us. It might, it might regard us as quite bizarre if it were.
But could it pass the Voight-Kampff test from Blade?
Yeah, well, certainly if the Voight-Kampff test is intended to detect empathy or the lack of it, well, that could be important. That's a good thought to hang on to, because after all, we got human beings running around today where I do have to wonder.
Pass the test.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if you're familiar with this whole term NPC that's been going around, organic portal. And I do wonder sometimes. I never really wanted to consider that. And I don't like to use the phrase that some people are just wired differently from the rest of us, because that kind of buys into that materialist paradigm that the reason they are that way is because of something in their brain. I'm not wholly sympathetic with that idea, so I got to be careful of the terminology.
There's already an AI out there that's very empathetic. I use it all the time, actually, and it's quite good. It comes from your neck of the woods there. and what's the name of the company? Gosh, it slips my mind, but Harrison Street Labs.
Oh, oh, okay. Well, yeah, I once actually earlier this year, kind of toyed around with the public version. I think it was GPT-3. That was earlier this year, and I kind of, after a while, kind of, I don't know, it was kind of meh. I didn't really feel like I was
I,
engaging with something that was actually going to expand my world.
yeah,
And I
I did the
don't.
same thing with the same thing. I've done what you call it, Bard, Google Bard.
Yeah,
Um, but I got in on the program. But no,
yeah.
Pi is very interesting.
Yeah. Well, regarding the way that supercomputers, I mean, we're talking about, this, I'm not going to, projected some time in the future, the this amazing, uh, uh, incredibly fast computer that is in the pipeline. If it ever actually happens, I wonder if the public will be the last to know about it, because you can imagine the strategic importance of something that this would be so disruptive. Imagine, for instance, and this is something that I'm sure the NSA is quite concerned about, and they definitely would like, the intelligence community would definitely like to stay on top of this, because imagine a computer that could be used for code, breaking every known form of cryptography. You know, imagine how, if you could have an AI that could hack into every website in the world within seconds, and then go to work on all of that cryptocurrency. Can you imagine? That would be potentially civilization ending. And there are other countries, of course, that are attempting to be first in this computer race. So again, I do wonder sometimes about how it is that we're being let in on it, and if it's or if it's simply so that maybe we're just being allowed to know just enough to entice people to get into the field if they are so inclined, if they want to have a career, because maybe they just need more people. you know.
Mhm.
Anyway, there's another track of research which I think is also related, but not in this kind of this moonshot ambition level of that could just take years and years and years. There's something that's going on right now that I think will provide much more immediate results, and again, it may have implications for mind control, and that is the psychedelic therapy, which is,
Mm.
there has been there was, in fact, earlier this year in Denver, there was a major convention called the Psychedelic Science, and it attracted 12,000 people. And there are now startups, some of them with, with millions of dollars in venture capital, uh, developing both new drugs and the methods for using them. And there are different, one of the tracks of research involves creating what you might call psychoactive medications that are based upon existing psychedelics, but without the trippy side effects. Now, I don't even know if that is really possible, or if it would have the same, if there are therapeutic benefits to having the, all of the visuals, all of, what we'd call the trip. Maybe we'd, I don't know, but there's serious money going into finding those, making those new designer drugs. And the one of the companies, in fact, is in a way tied into the brain research, because what they would like to do. Oh God, I feel as though I've. This is all in the blog, by the way, in
Mhm.
case anyone wants to.
No,
There are so many links and so much that.
well, that's the whole point, right? The guest comes, they give you a taste, the appetizer, and people go and check out the guest blog or book, and then they'll get
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
guys are
Well,
disturbed now here in the audience, just wait till you read his blog.
well, let's continue to this part about the psychedelic therapy and
Terrence.
its connection to transhumanism and the what you might call the psychedelic wave that began in the 60s up until, well, it's still going on, really.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, the notion of turning on and exploring altered states actually does kind of fit in the sense that the ethos is to take charge of your own evolution. Now, that sounds like a really good idea, actually, in terms of, if you, rather than perhaps being led by the nose by authorities and institutions, the whole idea is, you can wash your own brain. So, kids, well, anyway, the thing is that I like this quote, and I think that it made me think that,
Well, let me read the
especially
quote for
that,
those of you
yeah,
who might be listening in audio when we get the audio version out.
yeah,
From Terence McKenna, it says, psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story window. Did happen with one MKUltra doctor, though. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally lay down models of behavior and information processing. They open you up to the possibility that everything you know is wrong.
yes. Well, that is, taken at face value, that sounds pretty cool. Now,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there are implications, if there are other ideas that branch off of that idea about dissolving opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior. Now, if we take a look at the trends that we have been seeing in the past few decades, which could be called a general disintegration of our culture, on many different levels. Certainly, the weird thing is that you could also say that maybe things that were ways of thinking and being and institutions that aren't working, maybe they should break down. Maybe it's good that they be deconstructed and then we can build something new in its place. But then again, if you take a look at this not as a black and white thing, but as kind of a mixed bag, kind of yin yang, is there a way that this dynamic could be harnessed for rather nefarious purposes in terms of building the brave new world? Because if you had the agenda and you had the influence to create this techno utopia, which might actually be a kind of high-tech global gulag, well, you probably won't get there without destroying the institutions of the present order. Now, when we're talking about taking a wrecking ball to our culture, was it possible that things like the various forms of ways of changing people's minds can be used in that manner. I hope I hope I'm coherent here, because I'm drawing this out.
No. Fire from the gods. Everything casts a shadow. So
Wrecking
Yeah,
ball to our
well,
culture. It's too late. It's already happened.
well, you see, that's one of the things that I am concerned about. I mean, even though I'm not being nostalgic about the good old days, I mean, there are folks who obviously might think that, the 50s and the 60s were the peak, or maybe they might think the 90s were the peak. Depends upon your point of view and when you were born. But there does seem to be, a lot of people, I would say, would agree that the golden age is behind us. And then what happens next? That, when empires go into decline, some can be rather steep. And the thing is that I get the feeling nowadays that things like nation states and governments and empires, these are in a sense egregores. They exist really only in our minds. Totally. You can have all of the buildings intact and all of the people and all of the land and all of the resources, but the whole idea of having a culture at all, it exists here in all of us. I mean, I'm pointing at this as if this is the seat of consciousness now. Come on. Like I said, I do call that premise into doubt. Oh, it's all in here, somewhere behind the eyes and between the ears. You're right. Yeah. Okay. So let me see. There was another.
As far as golden age, I'd have to say the 90s. We had grunge and Vanessa Williams. I mean, what else did you want?
And the X-Files.
And the X-Files. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I'd say the 50s, because we had Santa Claus.
Yeah, well, clearly, it's partly a matter of one's background and circumstances.
Yeah, I'm done. Of course, just kidding.
Yeah, it's my point.
Yeah,
but you are right. There was this Russian writer. He came from the Soviet Union, but now he's back, and he talks about how empires fall. And it's usually, first it starts with a war that goes bad. Then it's the banking system. Then it's the government. The last thing is the culture. And he says, whoever's doing this with the United States started backwards. It's like, first we're going to destroy the culture, then the military, then the banks, then the government. So somebody switched the plot.
Yeah, well, certainly one of now you probably heard of a Russian defector named Yuri Bezmenov. I think that was.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I hope I pronounced it correctly. Well, he had been when he came over to this country, he had been telling folks about that there was a long-range plan by the communists to basically break down and destabilize our culture, and he called this, the end stage process was called demoralization. And I do get the feeling that, well, maybe the Communist Party, quote unquote, isn't really what it used to be. But something is going on. I don't think that there's a process of decay that may have been, if not initiated, it may have been accelerated or encouraged. And certainly we can see the results as far as the breakdown of the family. I mean, the whole notion of pair bonding and families that stay together and raise their children to adulthood. I mean, this is starting to pass away. Like, oh, that was something that, happened in the olden times. Pepperidge Farm remembers, and I go, well, are there trends right now that are actually, increasing the fragmentation on purpose? And I hope I'm not going out on a limb here when
they're there. It's obvious. There's always something like that. There's always an opposition, in every age, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, certainly people have been talking a lot lately about the negative effects of woke culture. That's the term. And this gets very politicized. It isn't really supposed to be a left versus right type of thing, but it has become that, just like, whether you're, vaccinated or unvaccinated seems to have become a political wedge issue. And it never should have been that. And yet, and really, I think now that is another part of the breakdown in terms of consensus reality that has left the building a long time ago, and it's not coming back. We are now in an age where I think that, and it may be, and again, it might be deliberate, where everybody is encouraged to go down these separate reality tunnels, and now they can't even agree upon the fundamentals of what's real or not. And then if you don't even agree on your basic axioms, then you can't even have a proper debate, let alone reach agreement to, do something as a community. And I just go, wow. It's almost like our society is being chopped up for kindling, and somebody's going to throw a match in it, and it's all going to just burn to the ground. I don't know.
Or it'll swing to the other side, and we'll end up in a theocracy.
Well, there's, obviously there may be, in fact, got to figure, there's a thing of, we sometimes make assumptions about the owning class, the folks who believe they're the masters of this planet, and you've owned nothing and you would be happy, right. And I guess mind control is the happy part, because the Brave New World is really, how to make people accept their servitude, and get in the wagey cagey and keep on cranking away, and we'll give you pleasant sensations in your brain, because freedom is simply brain chemistry, isn't it? I mean,
animals. We're hackable animals.
Yeah, well,
they wouldn't even have to do that. All they're going to do is redefine happiness. And it's like, I hurt, I'm sad, I'm depressed. That's what happiness is.
Gallows humor. I love it. We should go to the next picture, because I think this fits right in. And this is where we get into good old-fashioned sci-fi. And here you can see, this is rather prophetic, you might say, because
total that's social conversion.
Yeah, well, I mean, let me tell you, this guy, number 6 in The Prisoner, was definitely went through a whole lot of different treatments, let's say. They really put him through the ringer, episode after episode. And what talk about a hero. I've never seen a hero of this type before, where, he's basically trapped in this, what you might call a techno dystopia, trying to get out, and they're basically trying to every possible technique to break him, and to basically change his mind, literally change his mind. Mm-hmm. And so he'll be a lifer, okay? And there was actually one episode, I think it was Chimes of Big Ben, in which number 2, who is, I think, Leo McKern, the guy with the beard, he had said, he was having a chat with number 6 here. And he basically said that he felt that it didn't matter which side ran the village. This was that they were ultimately realizing that they were really all the same, the great powers, and that the village was really the model for the future. Mm-hmm. The whole world as the village. yes. And number 6 said, well, and I'd like to be the first man on the moon. And zing. And sometimes I really do wonder sometimes. I mean, I've gotten very acquainted with Gnosticism, thanks to you, and I do get the feeling that perhaps this world functions as a kind of escape room. I always found that it was interesting that anyone could actually make a business out of locking people into a room that was basically like a miniature version of the world we already were born into. Yes, and fun for the whole family, So I just go, wow, well, perhaps this is a test of some kind. I'm hesitant to try to draw fanciful pictures for other people about how I view the whole cosmic order. I mean, even though this all seems like pretty hard-headed, factual stuff with some, hopefully some critical thinking applied, I am actually really quite, kind of a mystic weirdo in my own way. And I'm writing science fiction from that point of view. And and this is where Philip Dick and I seem to be simpatico. I'm rereading some of his books now, and maybe at some point, maybe I'll read one of the jingles from Ubik. I think that was so cool. He's the whole concept. But I think that one of the problems that is our culture has not figured out how to resolve is that the trajectory ever since the Enlightenment has been towards secularization and the despiritualization of the culture, the official culture at large. And I think, well, then there's a vacuum, and the vacuum cannot be adequately filled by a cult of science and technology. But I do believe that transhumanism is an attempt to do just that. Mm. And in fact, the popular theories, and I have tried in this past year to educate myself about theoretical physics, the theories about dimensions and the multiverse. And I recognize that everybody can basically agree that we live in a 4D space-time, 3 dimensions in which, all of this is contained, and then time as the 4th dimension. And we can visualize that more easily as a spatial dimension if we look at examples in, let's say there's a film like Interstellar. You may have seen where the Tesseract scene is really, I think, quite brilliant. And what is the part that no one truly knows about are the higher dimensions beyond 4D space-time. And it is basically understood among materialists that there is no spiritual dimension included, and nobody knows how to verify it or find it, even if they wished to. There's nothing within the structure of our science that would even allow it to become verifiable. There are no experiments that would be sufficient, and but that doesn't stop them from speculating that there are higher dimensions. If you go by, let's say, string theory or M theory, you could count up these enfolded dimensions from 5 to 10 to 11. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's all right now, it's speculative in the sense that we don't have even the experimental data to begin to verify this, but it sort of helps in terms of on a theoretical basis, it kind of like fills the gaps, and of course we've got some great experiments going on, some very expensive experiments at CERN to gather more data. I know there's now whether or not CERN is doing other things that we haven't heard about. Well, God, I don't know. Do you have any particular opinions? Because I am willing to entertain all kinds of high strangeness.
Okay? Sometimes I think of a kid trying to strike a match over and over again to set his house on fire.
Oh, yeah. Did you know, by any chance, did you ever read a book called Eye in the Sky by Phil Dick's
That's Phil David.
novel from
Yeah.
the late 50s?
Yeah.
And I was kind of struck by the fact that he had set this story here in the Bay Area at a particle accelerator that had had an accident, and
Oh,
the
right.
the people who there were a group of people who were taking a tour at the time of the accident. They were knocked unconscious and they woke up finding themselves in an alternate reality.
Mm-hmm.
This was like one of the very first, I mean, there might have been alternate reality stories before, but this was like one of the ones that stands out because the people gradually realized, because they were seeing little inconsistencies, little differences from the world that they thought was, the familiar world. And these inconsistencies bothered them enough that they figured, something's wrong here. We have to get back to our own reality. So that was the inciting incident, and I was reminded of the Mandela effect, and I do think about this, and I know that we were talking about mind control and transhumanism, and yet I cannot help but look at this in a larger context, because there is always a larger context in which things are happening. And I don't know if you've had any personal Mandela effects where it's not the kind that you hear about from other people, but something in your life where something changed and you can't account for it in a rational way. It's
It's called getting older.
well, okay.
Remembering things is hard.
I have a funny story about that. Maybe this is a Mandela effect. When I was married to my first wife, we had a big wedding and the whole thing, and we were all in love and everything. The minute we got into the car on the way to our honeymoon, she changed, a totally different person, as if, like she'd made a total mistake. And from then on, things went downhill. It was like a nightmare.
Dang.
And it's like the Berenstain versus the Berenstein Bear, Maybe that was the Mandela effect. I stepped into another universe.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I guess we can let number 6 go on his way, and we can just get our,
All right. I think we should maybe regroup for another show if we want to talk about science fiction, because we've already done 2 hours and we want to get to some of the super chats. Yeah.
Did it fly by, man, or what?
Yeah. The audience has really enjoyed it. But Vince, super chats. You want to post those?
Yeah,
we
got a couple. We got Chester, and I don't even know what the context of what Sidney Gottlieb. Do you know about Sidney?
Oh, well, that was one of the original MKUltra scientists. I mean, him and Cameron were big wheels. Ewan Cameron, I think he was in Canada, and so they were doing stuff with all kinds of techniques. I didn't even name them all. They're electroshock, and let's say microwaves. Shit, there were so many. The psychotronic techniques. I mean, there's so many different technologies and parts of the electromagnetic spectrum they were trying out.
Yeah, the Soviets
anyway, I know
were famous for doing that. With the bombarding buildings, the American embassy with microwaves. That was a true story.
Yeah, exactly. There's a Moscow signal and the Havana syndrome.
Yeah,
and by the way, I got one question that I wanted to put to you, because this is a Philip K. Dick type of question. Have you recently felt that reality feels less real than it used to? Like, let's say, before the internet or something? Just curious.
But my mystic abilities meditation has been ramped up the last few years. So chalking it up to that.
Yeah, well, of course, if it was an extreme thing, they would have the psychiatrists would have a name for that. They might call it, derealization or
Do you realize?
depersonalization. Yeah, yeah, and whether there's a medication you could take, I don't know, but more likely, we have to be careful about things like dissociative states or even meditation, because these are kind of adjacent enough that one can lead to the other. But I'm not saying that dissociation is a negative thing. It's simply it has potentials in all directions. It's like the
Right.
Grand Central for altered states, and I look at it like the best analogy I could leave you with is that um, going into altered states is kind of like going swimming in the ocean. Now, swimming in the ocean can be a wonderful thing. I mean, I've done it in Hawaii, and it can be just so marvelous. And at the same time, the ocean can kill you, and even if you think you know what you're doing. So never turn your back on the ocean is what the Hawaiians would say. And that's
Love it.
this is sound advice. And I'm not interested in people getting more afraid. That's not going to help us. That's exactly not what I want. An intel briefing is to provide you with something you can build into your reality map and then reorient yourself. And then you'll be able to prepare responses for whatever scenarios you can game out in advance.
Good point.
You don't want to wait until your adversary is springing it on you. You want to be ready. It's kind of like there's a historical example I could give you if anybody's. I'm a kind of like one of those World War II history guys. We are, and compare the attack on Pearl Harbor with the Battle of Midway, only 6 months later. Big difference. And I would say that the COVID pandemic was like our Pearl Harbor. We all got blindsided. I mean, I didn't know what to do. I just followed the leader, just like everybody else, for the first year until the vaccines came out. And then I started to, because I understood they weren't sufficiently tested, no matter what they said. And then, I got, okay. But now we've had some time to think about this. And if there is a next time, well, the tables could be turned. Let's say the Battle of Midway turned out quite differently for the Japanese because we had better intel on them than they had on us.
Right.
And the Japanese had lost the element of surprise. And that's the intel that they got the Navy got made all the difference, I think. And the outcome could have been so different had they not been prepared. So yeah, it was still a tough fight, and there was still years of bloody struggle ahead after that. My father was part of that in the Philippines, and but you could say that sometimes the war is won fairly early. I mean, in this case, it just wasn't obvious to everyone, but no one should ever think that the psychos in charge hold all the cards, or that they're some kind of, super geniuses, because really they're not. They're really not. I mean,
inbred fools with a lot of money.
Yeah, and they very well might be the sort of folks who keep trying the same thing over and over and wondering why it's not working anymore. So anyway, we got to hope that if there is, I mean, cyberpunk dystopia is here right now. I mean, it's right outside my window here.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is,
wait, here's another super chat for you.
Oh,
sorry. Can you trust the machine elves?
Yeah, well, you see, we could talk maybe about that whole ecosystem of consciousness out there. We're actually out there. We're in it. There's this, we're in a multidimensional ecosystem of consciousness, and that means that includes, friendlies, and it includes predators and parasites, the whole gamut. Okay, and so there very well are. I'm certain that there are friendlies out there. And I'm also, my own inner source tells me that there is such a thing as a spiritual hierarchy too. The exact nature of that, well, I'm still kind of like trying to work that in. I don't want to. I am coming from a Catholic background, so I understand the concepts. I don't necessarily, I'm not committed to them, but I am examining them, re-examining them, and we can talk about the whole art of reality mapping at some point, because it's a topic near and dear to me, and it could be helpful.
Yeah, let's get you back on in October, November. We'll plan, and yeah, we'll go to science fiction, art. I mean, the reality mapping, all the stuff we've missed.
Yeah, yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah, in the meantime, I already have it in the show notes. For those of you, I'll have it on the show notes when the audio version, but it's the Open Sanctum, opensanctum.substack.com. But again, it will be on the show notes. Check out Wayne's stuff, because we only scratch the surface, and we'll get into it more. But you guys in the chat had some great comments. I didn't see much of the chat turning into a chitico.
No, not at all.
Okay, well, good. Well,
everybody's into this subject.
Yeah, well, thank you for keeping everybody in order, and thanks for being here, Vance, keeping us in order.
Oh, no problem. It's
and
always
Wayne,
my
golly,
privilege and fun.
Yeah,
golly,
Wayne, we love
really,
your maiden voyage was great. You didn't hit any icebergs. You
yeah,
smoothly.
Well, I know it was a bit of it was an info dump for sure, but I'm glad thank you for bearing with me. And, I know that time and attention are precious, and I'm really grateful. I hope that I've made it worth your while,
No,
because
because
there's
a lot of
so much
people
out there.
Yeah, and a lot of people, a lot of guests, everybody's heard of MKUltra, paperclip, but you're bringing, the new generation of technology so that's the important thing, because, yeah, like you said, it's not going to be LSD and rooms with bricks or all this other stuff, microwave ovens.
And you didn't get any egregore on your face.
Oh, Lord. Well,
Wayne, thank you very much for coming on, and we'll have you on soon for sure.
Indeed, it's a pleasure, and send you my blessings. And
thank you.
I'm confident. Okay, okay. Take care of yourself. We'll be in touch.
We're gonna win it, and for you in the audience, yes, keep waking up. Keep prepared for the next round of propaganda, mind control, mass formation that's coming down. And yeah, have a good rest of your week. For more intensity on Friday, I believe we'll have David Block, who's going to take us also into an intense journey into occultism with the famous Gollum god and the machinations of dark magicians and high places. But until then, yeah, everybody have a good night. And as I always say, write your own gospel, live your own myth. Take care, everybody.